Es un regalo para mí estar presente en la apertura de este segundo día e introducir a nuestro próximo Keynote. Debido a que él es americano, permitirme hacer la introducción en inglés. For today's opening, we have an incredible human being. He has been a pioneer in the Agile world for over 20 years, bringing in this thinking and methods from systemic coaching, organizational development, leadership development, integral and systemic methods that are relevant to the transformation of self, culture, and leadership in the service of organizational agility. He has taught, mentored, and coached several thousand of people around the world, including Agile coaches, managers, and leaders. Who else can have the courage and wisdom to bring his topic to the CAS? Community of coherence, complexity, connection, and the future of humanity. It pleases me to introduce to all of you our next keynote, my friend and mentor coach, Michael Spayd.
Gracias. Hola. Buenos dias. That is all the Spanish that I know. Thank you for listening in English. Sorry, I have that limitation. When this picture was taken more than 50 years ago, it helped humans realize that we live on a very small planet, that it's a beautiful planet, that it just has this abundance of all kinds of things, and it's really small. And what I want to talk to you about is our home planet and a picture of the whole in some sense. I want to talk to you about a new way we might relate to that home as a whole. But I want to remind you first of something that you all had a hand in, big hand in, which is, maybe you remember this moment, heard about it, or you read about it, or you memorized it. How many people know what this is? Agile Manifesto. I think it was signed on February something, maybe 10th, 2001. And it was it connects with my anniversary. I've been involved with the Agile for 23 years now. Shortly after this was signed, I wasn't there. I wasn't anything a part of that, but if you think about it, but I was involved pretty much since the beginning, and it was an outrageous vision to take the most complicated thing that people do together, collaborate across organizational boundaries to create software, and totally change how that works. Now, one of the themes that's common now in the Agile world is, are we at an Agile reset? Is Agile dead? Heard that. Agile worked. we were successful. Agile is no longer a question. You have to use these methods. We reduced the failure rate from 59% using waterfall to only 11% usually using Agile. That's a really big, you know how to hold a vision and make it real. Whether you were involved early on, whether you've only been involved in the last year, your dedication to going to meetups, to going to conferences like this, to studying, to evangelizing, to stretching your own boundaries, you're really good at realizing a vision. And you did. And I don't know what's next here, but you did a great job. So give yourselves a round of applause, will you? So, but this is what our world looks like. It doesn't look like that lovely picture, Spaceship Earth, they called that picture. The world right now is full of problems. We call it a meta-crisis because it's a crisis of crises. We have challenges with the climate. We have extreme temperatures, extreme heat, record-setting years. You've had floods here, I know, in Valencia. We had floods near me in Asheville, North Carolina. Devastating, crazy things. We have refugees all over the world. We have all kinds of hotspots, war zones, terrorism, disinformation. The world is a wreck in a certain way. And possibly have the ability to shift it in some way. So you remember Einstein. Einstein gets quoted a lot. I love quoting Einstein. He said, you can't solve a problem with the mindset that created that problem. So we've been in a certain kind of a mindset, we call it the achievement orange worldview, and it has taken us to this place in a useful way, and now it's causing a problem. So we want to look at complex adaptive systems as a place to find a new model, a new way of... This is a man named Buckminster Fuller. He was a great architect, inventor, futurist. He used to come to my college, and I didn't get who he was, and so I regret that I never got to see him. But he invented this geodesic dome. Perhaps you've seen one or been in one. And what he said, if you want to change the existing reality, you don't attack it, you build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. Now, you all are really good at determining if a model is a good one, if a framework is a good one, which one is best. Is that true? You've done that a lot. So I want to get your thoughts about this possible new idea. So we're going to talk about a different way of thinking about economics, growth first. This is our collective thinking when we play the economic game, which is most of the time actually, is this picture, that there's an upward growth trend that's going to go on forever. Now that sounds good on a certain level, but what living system grows without checking? Usually when a system grows without checking, in us it's called cancer. Growth never stops. Growth is a natural part of the process, but then there's also stability and sustaining and eventually going away. That's the natural cycle of things. So it's got us a lot of cool things and a higher standard of living, but it's got a problem to it. So this is a different way of thinking. So this is called donut economics, and you'll see at the top of the green, that's a green donut. At the top is the ecological ceiling. So that's showing us the planetary boundaries or thresholds that we're in danger or already have crossed. So you'll see climate change at the top is very red. Biodiversity loss is very red. Land conversion. Those are all outside the threshold of where we want them to be to have a survivable planet. So this is like a dashboard of planetary human well-being. On the inside is the social foundation. So environmental things, planetary things, and now human things. Do people have enough water? Do they have food? Do they have health care? The basic things that create decent living on our planet. And you'll see all the red on the inside, the shortfalls that we have around sorry. I've tried to memorize this talk, but it didn't quite work. So this gives us a different kind of a picture of where we actually are, what's really going on with our environment. So what's underneath this is two different paradigms. The first one ties back to the GDP, the gross domestic product. And it is how much financial value can we extract from this enterprise? How much can we take out? And when I looked up the definition of extraction, it's the act of taking something, especially by force, like not replenishing environmental resources. So there's a mindset that 200 years ago, 150 years ago, didn't matter to us at all. We weren't up against, the human population wasn't big enough, industrial capacity wasn't big enough to push these boundaries. Now we're at the brink. So when we work in an extractive way, we become insensitive to these natural cycles of growth. We think that we can grow forever. And on a constrained planet, that's not possible. The other model is how many benefits can we generate in the way we design this enterprise. So we are moving from extraction and making a few wealthy to a bigger pie, to thinking about one of the examples. The donut economics is a very interesting model that I've come across recently. A lot of really great work, highly open sourced, really good facilitator guides, stuff to help you figure out with your organization, could you become a more regenerative organization in how you work? When they looked at this, some examples they gave are shoes that could be extended over as a child's foot grew. And so it would make it a lot cheaper for everybody, a lot less planetary waste, cheaper for the parents and whatnot. It grew as they grew up, and it was a profitable product, but it didn't meet the normal margin requirements, which were probably like 15% or something. It didn't hit that threshold that they normally use to evaluate things, and so it was rejected, which just seems like a terrible waste. Like there was good intention, but because of this embedded growth obligation, because of this continual, we always got to grow, that's what it means to be healthy. I feel that, U.S. GDP grew 2-point-something%. Oh, great. We're trained to that. There's reason why that's a smart thing, and there's reasons why that's a problem now. How could we give benefits to the planet, to our employees, to our customers, to our communities, not just... So this diagram helped me see that there is I used to think that sustainable was where we wanted to be. Sustainable sounds good, it is good from some point of view, but we're right now in a more degenerative mode, and sustainable is great, but regenerative is on the other side of that. How could we revitalize things with how we work, not just keep even? And I'll give you a picture of that. This is, you just take in the pictures, moving from degenerative to sustainable to regenerative. And moving from divisive poverty wages, slave wages, wage slavery as a term. A lot of people are hooked into it. They don't want to, they'd rather do something else, but they work at a job because they make a lot of money. Been there myself. To a living wage and profit share. There's a lot. In terms of wealth inequality, think about the fact that the 8 richest people in the world have more money than the bottom 4 billion. That's pretty shocking for me. So let's see if this could be a new vision. If you're wanting to change the world, or making your team better, or helping shift your transformation or your culture to a different way of being, we have to remember that we are not only individuals, but we are inherently systemic beings. We inherently belong to families, to religious organizations, social organizations, to work systems. We belong. We feel actually very insecure if we're not belonging in systems. It's part of who we are. So we have to think on that level, and including some things from complex adaptive systems can be very helpful to us. So this is a model. This is from Glenda Oyoung, who actually did the keynote here last year. Some of you saw that. So 4 things maybe about complex adaptive systems. One is that there's a series of containers that hold the system together, like a team room, like a Zoom room. And there's a set of differences that provide the energy and tension, like the skill sets, the different skill sets of team members, and allow change, and exchanges of information, energy, connection. That's how, and they form patterns, and you shift patterns. You can't control patterns like that. You can only shift them. The other thing is that complex adaptive systems don't have linear causality. So one thing doesn't cause another directly. The idea of root cause is very ingrained in us, but root cause doesn't work in a complex adaptive system because there's not just one cause. There's nonlinear causality, they call it, and that's different things causing each other. So science and management's preference, when you think about systems, there's 3 different kinds of, or 3 different states of systems. Well, let's talk about open and closed systems first. So science and management have preferred closed systems with linear causal relationships. In fact, science models, like when you try to work out the physics of gravitation, they have a thing called the 3-body problem, which is that they can work out the mathematics of 2 bodies, the moon and the earth, let's say, and their gravitational effects on each other. But if you add a 3rd one in, it's too complex. There's too much stuff happens, and they can't actually make it work. So they've simplified things to a point where they can actually measure them and have their techniques work, but they don't actually capture reality. So this is what management thinking has been. That's the inherent management thinking is, stability, order, predictability, right? We want to have predictability in our businesses. What our work is actually like is disorderly, unstable, diverse disequilibrium, open systems with nonlinear causal relationships. We don't know what causes what sometimes. We might have a theory, but it's not necessarily true. A quote from a man named Ilya Prigogine, who's provided the title of this talk, basically. He was a chemist and got the Nobel Prize back in the 1970s. And he said, most of reality, instead of being orderly, stable, and equilibrial, is seething and bubbling with change, disorder, and process. I sort of had that experience trying to get coffee yesterday. I don't know if you experienced it. You might have been absorbed with your colleagues or thinking about what session you were going to, but I was surfing the crowd, and it was seething with different things going different directions, people having different intentions, trying to get different things, the food running out somewhere, this happening somewhere else. It was wild. So open and closed, and then at equilibrium, near equilibrium, or far from equilibrium. This is a system that's near equilibrium. A system that's near equilibrium or at equilibrium takes a lot of shocks. You can't do much to change it because it's in a stable condition already. It's naturally orderly, and so it stays that way. A happy marriage is as a potential example of a stable relationship. An unhappy marriage, not so much. A good team may be an example of a stable system at equilibrium. On the other hand, what Prigogine discovered was that systems that are far from equilibrium are in a state of chaos. And chaos is not the lack of order. It's an unstable order. So it's when you have a certain, he described this bifurcation point that happens in systems where they are unstable and then something happens that makes them go down to disorder or up to a higher level of order. His quote, systems far from equilibrium are at maximal chaos or disruption. Unlike closed systems, they don't move towards equilibrium and entropy, but rather seek for a higher, new, emergent order. So there's this bifurcation point, as he called it, where a moment of truth, where a system can shift from disorderly, chaotic to orderly. And that's what I'm really interested in. His quote, when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. So you don't need much of a system necessarily to change it. You could change it with a small island of coherence. One of the examples I thought of in watching them, I've been watching the CAS staff. They are an island of coherence. They have a very tight working relationship. They have a good time. We had a great time in here rehearsing today before everybody came in. They are the island of coherence in this sea of chaos. I don't know if they feel that way, but Margaret Mead said it this way, the same thing. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So I'm connecting that you can change a system by creating coherence in a small part of it. So now we're moving into the social technology of coherence. I have, the main thing that I do is to create coherence in small groups of students on a development path. Not just learning, but actually growing, changing the way that they work together. Coherence is something that's well planned, clear and sensible. The parts go well together. That's some sense of structure. A second definition, statistical similarity of a field. So a laser is a coherent light, very focused and precise because it's statistically similar. That's another definition of coherent. And a third one is a sweet spot where the parts work together to help a system achieve equilibrium and balance with its environment, and it's fit for function. So that's what we're looking for when we use social coherence techniques. And here's some examples of ones that you might want to, and then I'll talk about how I think you get there, some suggestions for how you create coherence in a small group. So Agile delivery team, that's a fairly obvious one. Sometimes they have a coherence to them. Is that your experience? Sometimes they're really bonded together with how they work. A technical practice cohort. You might do mob programming or some kind of dojo with practicing technical practices together. I run expertise mastery cohorts where people have a certain skill set, trying to move to a certain kind of a place, and they do that with each other, and we create coherence, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Sometimes you introduce a cohort into an organization that instead of training people in a public kind of forum, you train them all within their organization, like to create a. We've been doing that in organizations, and I'm surprised that you can get a group of real coherence in an organization with certain techniques that create a different experience for people. People are amazed at how much they learn with each other, how much they care about each other, how much they feel seen by each other in this context, how they feel a common bond. World work, a man named Arnold Mindell, who worked in conflict situations all around the world. His idea is that with him as the facilitator of a highly conflictual process, like in a social context, by him doing his own inner work and getting clear as his own system, creating coherence within himself, like about his own racism or sexism or some kind of bias that he had, could become a clear vessel and shift the system to a higher place of understanding with each other. I call this containers of deep belonging, and what I experience is a refuge where members find an unshakable sense of well-being and belonging. That's a nice place to be. So some thoughts for creating coherence. So the invitation here is for you to start some kind of a group that might create coherence together around whatever is important to you. It could be the regenerative move on the planet. It could be on your team. It could be within your organization. Here's some thoughts about how to work with that. Select people for their alignment to the purpose you have. It might take a while to find the right people, but you don't let everybody in, because not everybody is aligned with the purpose that you have. So you can be choosy about that. You want to help people feel supported and challenged. So this is something we call deliberately developmental environments, where not just I'm going horizontally to get more knowledge, but I'm going vertically to change the way I'm thinking, to change the worldview that I'm looking from, to create a more inclusive worldview, a more full one. Cultivate both heart exchanges and mind exchanges. So an example is we differentiate between reporting and sharing. So reporting is when I talk about, oh yeah, this person did this and this happened, and I'm divorced. I'm just looking at it on autopilot. When I share from my process, you feel what happened to me. You get a sense of me and what's going on. It changes the space when you do that, when you keep insisting on that, and it shifts how people relate. Find a path or practice to evolve consciousness. You don't have to be a Zen monk to do that. You could be. You could do a mindfulness meditation practice. We do that in our cohorts. But even asking powerful questions sincerely, other kind of practices that just expand consciousness a little bit, take us out of the rat race of our day-to-day lives. Make room for the whole person. People want to be seen. They want to bring their full self to what they do. That creates a different, you can feel the coherence, if I can. And be open to this happens. Sometimes it surprises me what happens in these cohorts. It's like, it's not me. I hold a container. I set a boundary in some sense. But it just happens. It happens when you when you have a good design, coherence happens. It's a beautiful thing. So, invitation. If you're moved to start a cohort of some kind around anything that you want to, I invite you to just tell me that, to share that with me. I'm only looking for a few of you. Could be more, but I'd love you to tell me that if you're motivated to do that. Thank you very much. Appreciate your attention and happy to have questions. Oh, sorry, some references and resources and any questions? Done to silence. Sure.
Hello.
Hey.
Thanks for all the things you just shared. Some of us are working in big companies. Others are helping those companies to achieve their goals or finding new ways of working and so on and so forth. One of the most difficult things we find is how to sort of have permission, if we can put it that way, on starting those cohorts and trying to find ways to help those companies to reach those levels of consciousness at the same time as they are pursuing and economic results.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can have something to little piece of advice. Maybe?
Well, yeah, I totally get that kind of challenge. So sometimes they're going to need to be, might need to start them sort of on the DL, like not tell people about it a lot. You know, that they can be volunteer, because you're going, you don't need a lot of people to create coherence. So this is a sort of a guerrilla activity, I think. You do it however you can. And, well, what would I say about that? there are almost always pockets in big companies have a different quality to them because there's a certain superstructure level at which, forget about it, but there's pockets of people that have a different kind of energy to them. So this is mainly when we look at change management, we think about the entire system and how we're going to work the whole system. And I'm exploring here, that doesn't work very well. You're looking for this bifurcation point. You're looking for that coherence can flip a much bigger system. So you're looking for a very tiny part of it that's just open to it, where it's easy. Easy is right. Taoist point of view. Go where it's easy. I used to say Spayd's law of organizational change was only go where you're wanted. You don't go where you don't pick fights. It doesn't help. Is that responsible? Or you have a? Yeah, thank you. Other questions, comments? Hard to see you all. Good night. Last call. There they are.
Fun, eh?
Hello.
Hello.
I've noticed in organizations when people see coherence, they say we want exactly the
Yep.
same thing,
Yes.
and it won't be.
Yes.
Do you
right.
have advice on how to explain that?
What's the dilemma for you? What's the start your? I'll help you start a group. What's the conflict for you or the challenge? Do I already lose the mic? Sorry.
When people see amazing change
Yes.
and they want exactly the same,
Yeah.
but it was a special group of people
Yeah.
with special skills,
Yeah.
how do you explain that it won't be the same?
I don't know. I mean, it obviously is going to be different. There's going to be something. I might invite him into that boundary, a team or whatever it is. I might have them pay a visit to them and talk to them about it that way and how it's just always going to be different. And focus on, what makes the coherence for this group. That's where the lessons may be that you can gain is how would they talk about it, what they have. I don't know if I can be more helpful to you in that. Anything else?
Hello, very interesting talk. And I have a question. I'm very interested by the topic of coherence, and especially when you apply it like to small groups, like you say. We don't want to change everybody, we just want to change some people. And I think traditionally what is seen in many organizations, you start working with some teams, but maybe you don't get the executive buy-in for that, and there's a disconnect. And you get these pockets of happiness, but not a big change in the organization. So I'm wondering if you have some experience or some examples to share where that coherence in smaller teams can actually expand to the bigger organizations when you don't have the executive buy-in.
Well, I'm near the beginning of my using this approach, so I haven't seen it, you know, in the full scale of it. But I'm impressed with, you know, start setting up cohorts, including managers. So I used to just teach coaches. I mean, I've taught thousands of coaches. I haven't taught nearly as many managers, but and it's been surprising to me the level that they can get to. Part of being choosy, though, you can't just pick anybody. Not everybody is going to, you know, be consistent with a certain kind of group, right? So, I've seen several groups of managers and coaches be in a cohort together, 25 people kind of thing, and have, you know, amazing experiences. They said the best training I've ever had, which is from managers, not just from coaches. And so this is not a strategy of how you can predict or control things, right? It's how you can set the conditions for something to happen. So it's part of the difficulty of this is that we don't have control of it, actually. We can influence it, we can certainly shift it, but, you know, controlling change doesn't actually work. We think it does. That's the management paradigm. That's the belief or the expectation, but it's just not true, not in my experience anyway. So there's a certain resignation or letting go of attachment to the outcome, and just the coherent pattern is sort of worth doing by itself. Maybe it will shift something. No. Any thoughts?
Michael, I think we are run out of time, so
Okay.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you all.